Okay.
Hello and welcome to episode 39 of the Chills of Will podcast. It is a pleasure today to be joined by the talented poet, talented writer, Jose Hernandez Diaz. Jose Hernandez Diaz is a 2017 NEA Poetry Fellow. He holds degrees in English and creative writing from the University of California at Berkeley, Go Bears, and Antioch University, Los Angeles. He's the author of the chapbook of prose poems, The Fire Eater, which was published in 2020 through Texas Review Press, and he has been awarded a fellowship by the National Endowment for the Arts. He lives in Southern California. About his chapbook, The Fire Eater, Felicia Zamora, who is the author of Instrument of Gaps, wrote, "In these homages to humanity, Jose Hernandez Diaz weaves magic and duality, a conjuring of metamorphosis from unknowing to understanding. These lines invent themselves as a circuitous way of thinking, a non-linear way of experiencing. We stand on the precipice of fire in Hernandez Diaz's poems. We inhabit a place where orange roses burst into flames, preachers transform into pigeons, flames walk among us and turn to ash. We are simultaneously dragon and coyote, and where seeing the stars from the moon speaks to the delicacy of our sparks, our actions, our bones. A world exists in these poems where eating fire may be our only skill, but the scars on our, quote, autumnal hearts prove we were here, prove we were a part of it all, prove that we believe the flames may one day be ours to wield. Hernandez Diaz creates a multidimensional existence, one where Latinx artists may, quote, dream about existence beyond the clouds, unquote, an existence filled with part wonder, part pain, but most importantly, part possibility." That's a pretty dang good review you got from
Yeah,
Felicia Zamora, huh?
it's perfect.
Eh.
Yeah.
How do you know her, or how did you work with her?
I just know her through publishing in journals, and
Mm-hmm.
I would see her name all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And she won the Montoya Prize a couple of years ago. And I reached out to her and I told her I was a fan of her work and
Mm-hmm.
if she would read it and write a blurb for us. She said, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, she's a heck of a writer. Just based on that review, I want to go read some of her stuff.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah.
Officially welcome. Thanks so much for joining me. It's a pleasure
Thank
to
you.
have you. Hey, how'd I do on the intro? Is there anything else you want to add?
No, that's perfect.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I'm in my classroom, so we got the automatic lights going on.
Okay.
So again, a pleasure to have you. And I've had writers of all types, poets, sports writers, journalists, and I know you're not just a prose poet, not just a surrealist poet, but I'm really looking forward to talking about surrealism and prose poetry. So
Definitely.
tell me a little bit about growing up. You grew up in LA, in the LA area?
Yeah, I grew up in Wenham Park, which
Okay.
is northern Orange County.
Right.
And then when I was 14, we moved to Norwalk, which is southeast LA County. So
Okay.
I kind of go back and forth all the time. So
Sure. Buena
yeah.
Park is right there by, is that Knott's Berry Farm?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So growing up in, I say LA kind of generically, North Orange
Yeah.
County, etc. What were you reading? Did you grow up speaking English and Spanish, or are you monolingual, or?
Yeah, no, we grew up speaking Spanish in the household. Our parents are from Mexico, but I tend to be I'm in the younger sibling group.
Okay.
So my older siblings were already speaking English to us.
Mm-hmm.
So they grew up more like mostly only Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
and I grew up with my siblings speaking English to me already.
Okay.
So I kind of grew up with both.
Sure.
Yeah, but they did place me like in the ESL and initially,
Mm-hmm.
and then they took me out.
Mm.
Yeah.
What did you gain from being bilingual, speaking Spanglish, Spanish? What do you gain from having being multilingual?
Well, you're breaking up at the end, but I think you're just saying what I gained from bilingualism.
From being bilingual, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of a window into a different culture.
Sure.
There's a little more flavor to it, I think. But growing up in Orange County, which is kind of like a conservative area,
Hmm.
even Northern Orange County, which is more like on the outskirts of the working class, um, people tended to speak English on the street, and then at home we would speak Spanish.
Hmm.
That's kind of how it was over there. And I noticed when we moved over here to Norwalk, it was like mostly Spanish
Mm-hmm.
in and out of the house.
Sure.
So it's kind of like a little confusing, I think, when you're younger, you know,
Mm-hmm.
learning to manage all of that. And also, I would mostly speak English, honestly. And I tended to lose the fluidity with my Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
except like if I go to Mexico or something, and then it just comes out naturally, and
Nice.
you have to practice it more, obviously. So
Nice.
yeah,
What part of Mexico do your parents come from?
they're from ranches in Guanajuato, Mexico.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
I had a student today in class who was saying the same thing, and that his parents are from Guanajuato.
yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Do you write in Spanish? Have you written in Spanish?
When I used to read like Octavio Paz and a lot of the modernist writers from the last century, I would have to read like a lot in Spanish,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would start writing in Spanish like decently, not like it would be more fractured, like surrealistic, like Octavio Paz.
Okay.
But no, I was never trained to write in Spanish or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. It's more just by ear.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in the Fire Eater really that much, if at all. Do you sprinkle in Spanglish, or do you
Yeah,
feel
well,
like?
like I was telling you earlier, my manuscript is divided into two sections. My
Mhm.
full length.
Mhm.
This is the chapbook is the second half, and
Okay.
that's just surreal prose poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, when I was writing surreal prose poetry, I tended to just be in English and not really. It was more like influenced by the Midwestern poets like James Tate and Russell Edson.
Okay.
Where I would write about just everyday things and American things.
Uh-huh.
But lately, like I have one called El Sombrero, a prose poem where I mix in more Spanish, but it does tend to be sprinkled in. It's not like
Sure.
elaborate, you know.
Sure.
And also in my more identity-based Chicano poems, I do sprinkle it in a lot more in there too.
Sure.
Yeah,
I mean, we could probably do 3 hours on this question alone, but
yeah.
do you, like in the review I read, it talked about Latinx, and you say Chicano. Would you
Yeah.
consider yourself to be Mexicano, Chicano, Latinx, all of the above?
I think all of the above, and at different moments sometimes, you know. I just call myself Mexican American.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
I used to when I was younger, I'd call myself Chicano. Sometimes I just wouldn't even think about it, you know, growing
Mm-hmm.
up.
Mm-hmm.
But now I would say Mexican American.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What culture, what books, what movies, what songs, what were your parents, what did your family bring to you as a child? Like, what were you into because of them?
Well, we kind of grew up like just like tradition, like everyday American type movies, you know, The Sandlot and things like that. The Spanish we would watch sometimes would be like the novelas that they
Sure.
would watch, but I didn't understand half of it. But it was like, you know, those beautiful women on there,
Yeah, right.
and so I think the biggest thing is like the food.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that to this day is like we pretty much stick to Mexican food, and I think that's maybe one of the most important parts that has been handed down. I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what were you reading as a kid? What were your interests like? Who were some of the writers or genres or books, poetry, etc., that got you into writing, that got you excited about literature?
Well, as a kid, I was mostly on the street playing basketball. Honestly,
Nice.
I was into the Lakers and Nick Van Exel and Eddie Jones, Cedric Sabalas. I was like before they had Shaq and Kobe.
Sure.
So I was mostly playing basketball. I thought I was going to go to the NBA, all that stuff. And then I got to high school, and the coach was like, "You got no left dribble." Like I just do the right dribble, like this, like street ball. I never played in a league or anything like that. We couldn't afford any of that stuff. And then he said, but you're good at football. You're a starter, so just focus on football. So I was just playing football. And then I got to my junior year of English, and my high school teacher, Mrs. Weir, said, you're getting a D in my class, and your test scores are coming out that you're, very, very, they're very high, the test scores. So I want you to try harder and read more. And like, this is the first time somebody really like said like I was good at school, So it was like, well, I was in honors in elementary and stuff like that, but I just cared about sports mostly,
Sure.
And I remember I was in honors in junior high, and most of the students there were like nerdy and stuff. So I told my mom, it's too hard. Can you sign me out of these classes? I didn't know that, that was like, that could potentially damage my future, So yeah, I was signed out all the honors classes and stuff.
Yeah.
And my parents did not really know what's going on, like they did not really have education, opportunity for education. So this teacher says that, and then I just feel like $1 million, like, oh, I'm good at language, So I started reading like Salinger. I think that's the book that spoke to me at first, because everything else before that was like Shakespeare and it just sounded so like a long time ago, for some low income kid, first generation. Like it's just like I'm not gonna get into these plays, like and I like the idea of he was saying everything was phony and this and that,
Right.
I know everybody hates it now, the book. A lot of people hate it, but I just remember I also liked that it was written like in everyday language,
Uh-huh.
And it just spoke to me in the sense that like it could be considered literature and still be in the everyday language.
Sure. Did now you shout out your teacher, you said is it Mrs. Weir?
Mrs. Weir.
I've seen on social media that you said something about you send her the journals when you get published.
Yeah, every now and then, yeah.
That's really cool. That is so cool that you do that. I bet she loves that.
Yeah.
So what was some of the first writing you did that kind of raised some eyebrows in a positive way? Like, okay.
I remember it was an essay that she assigned about the American dream, and just like what I thought about the American dream. Is it possible? What do I want in my future?
Sure.
And I just started like quoting Rage Against the Machine, like that one song that goes, what was it? The American dream is hypocrisy, brutality. I think I chose like 3 things, like hypocrisy, brutality, the elite. I think, and I wrote like
all of which are American dreams.
All of which are. That was how I kind of plagiarized them at the end of the essay. Honestly, I was like, well, that's how I ended it. All of which are American dreams. All of which are American. So I don't know if she probably didn't know that song, but I remember that awesome. Like she was like, "Wow, this is really good." And also at Berkeley, I was sort of having trouble getting into like older literatures, and like the classics and stuff like that. And my professor, Mrs. Langan, assigned us to write sonnets, and I was like, wow, I have to write like in a scheme and it has to rhyme and all that stuff. So what I did was like I wrote it with like sort of sticking to those rules, but sort of like criticizing those rules at the same time.
Oh, okay.
So I was kind of like I think I was sort of what's the word, like a contrarian when I was younger. Yeah.
So you were shaped by tradition, but you were also not afraid to go against it.
Yeah.
And criticize it. I want to say, I think the song you're talking about, I think is "Wake Up." Isn't that the one from The Matrix? Have you seen The Matrix?
Yeah, I think it is. I haven't seen it, but I think that it was like not on an album. It was on the Matrix soundtrack.
Yeah. No, I mean, the end of that song is like you said, all of which are American dreams. So So
You know?
you should be paying royalties to Zach De La Roca, I guess, huh? Yeah.
I know. I just got one picked up yesterday that from. I have the Man in the Pink Floyd shirt, and now I started a new series with the Man in a Rage Against the Machine shirt.
Nice.
So like,
oh,
yeah.
Man. Yeah, what a great band. I just think about what if they were still, I mean, I know like Tom Morello does his own thing.
Yeah.
Makes great music. I just wonder if that group was together in times of all this ridiculous upheaval and, you know, Trumpism, all that, they would be incredible.
Especially the last 4 years.
Right? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I saw them in 2010 or so. They got together and they did a fundraiser for Dolores Huerta, the labor organizer.
Yeah.
That was pretty incredible. But
yeah.
Anyways, we won't talk about them for too long.
They got roots in the whole movement and stuff. I think his parents were like muralists, or his dad was a muralist.
Right.
His mom was like a professor, educator.
They go way back, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. But yeah, I appreciate the fact that you know, like you, I thought I was gonna be an NBA player, and then you get to a certain point, and it's like, oh, maybe I got to do something else.
Yeah.
You know, I got to do something else.
Yeah.
Tell me about Berkeley. How else you were shaped there, and your experience at Cal Berkeley.
Well, Berkeley, I just love the whole idea of like, you know, independent thinking. And when I was younger, especially, I was into like, you know, rock and roll and underground hip hop. And so, yeah, like I was listening more to like MF Doom when I was in college, and Anacon and Def Jux and different underground rappers instead of like reading, you know. So I would get by. I would write essays, you know, and get by, but I was not really a good student, I don't think, you know. It took me a while to finish my degree.
Sure.
I was diagnosed with bipolar. So I think I took like a non-traditional path to acquiring my degrees, because I also was a transfer student.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So pretty horrible to hear about MF Doom's death.
Yeah. That's surprising.
I'm you know, I know a little bit. I can't say that I'm an expert. What was it about his stuff that spoke to you?
I think it was the non sequiturs, just like the art of that, you know, just like the collage. He like brings you to New York City just with like mundane imagery, you know, and I've always been a fan of that, whether it's New York school poetry in terms of like Dean Young or something, you know. So I've always just been a fan of like little moments being big, I think. Yeah, we'll definitely get into the idea of like the non sequitur and logic or lack of in some of your poetry later on. Very cool. Well, let's get to you know, your writing and your published writing. What not that the Fire Eater is the end all be all. What have you had published in smaller ways before that? I know that's a collection, right? Right.
What led you to say, hey, I can actually publish my writing and people are going to read it and people are going to, you know, pay me, whether it's with contributor copies or money? You know, what led you to that?
I think first of all was reading a lot of spending time at the library. And I remember one time a professor wrote something about SB 1070 for a professor I had from Berkeley. And I said, you know, I want to write a poem about that. And it was called The Border Within. And I published it in Poets Responding to SB 1070, which is like an online group. We weren't getting paid or anything like that, but we felt we were, you know, resisting against xenophobia, etc. And then I got a message that it was going to get published in the Best American Non-Required Reading. And that was like my second publication ever, you know?
Wow.
So I was like, wow. And I've never been published in there ever, you know, since then, or in any other of the Best American series.
Wow.
So I was just like, okay, you know, I could tell that I was, you know, I was pretty good at it, because I wasn't really good at much else. So yeah, I think that's mainly when you see your name in print the first couple times, you see it attached to like, you know, a university or something like that, and an MFA program. you feel like everything was worth it, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Man, heck of a debut if you got into the best American non-required reading. That's incredible. Wow. Could we find that piece online, or is it only in print, or?
It's only in print.
Only in
Yeah.
print? Yeah.
It's
That's
in
awesome.
the 2011 edition.
2011 is nice.
10 years ago, yeah.
Nice. The name of the podcast is the Chills at Will podcast. It's about those lines, those excerpts that bring you chills, that, you know, like that Rage Against the Machine line, something that you could just summon from memory, you know?
Yeah.
Who, I mean, you talked about a little bit with Salinger and stuff. Who and what were some of those pieces that have given you chills at will over the years?
Well, I think I remember when I first started reading poetry, it was Francisco Alarcón,
okay,
from the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
He has a book called Snake Poems, and they just spoke to me. They were written like in a thin line,
Mm-hmm.
and they were about being Chicano and American and Mexican and everything like that. So I've had like different writers speak to me at different times. I'm not good with like coming off lines off the top of my head, but so yeah, just Ray Gonzalez, Richard Garcia,
Okay.
Marosa de Giorgio, Octavio Paz. I think Octavio Paz is the main one.
Yeah.
I went to the library and I saw his book there, and you know, I read that he won the Nobel and everything, and I never knew a Mexican had ever won the Nobel.
Huh.
And I just started reading him, and there was, you know, it was quick, and he juxtaposed things, and it was surreal, and it was about the city and everyday life.
Yeah.
And so I just liked like the collage aspect to it, and so yeah, different writers have spoke to me.
That's cool. What was so you said Francisco Alarcón, right?
Yes, Francisco X Alarcón. He actually taught at Davis.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's there's a lot of writers with that last name. There's Daniel Alarcón.
Oh yeah.
I was thinking him, but you said Francisco. Yes. Octavio Paz. Like, I was a Spanish major in college, and so we did Cinco Maestros, which is an anthology of like the five of the greatest in Spanish.
Right.
Garcia Marquez, Rulfo, I think Cortázar. I don't think Paz made it in there. I mean, obviously he is one of the greatest, but
Borges, he wrote probably.
Right, Borges, exactly.
Yeah.
He wrote poetry. I think the other one might have been, it was either Carlos Fuentes or, sorry, but anyways, Paz obviously wrote more shorter pieces, right? This was more short stories and stuff. Surrealism is his thing. People think of like Salvador Dali, you know, with the painting and stuff. What is surrealism to you? I mean, I know there's a dry definition that I could read, but what is it about Paz's work, you know, that led into you writing often and with surrealism? What does it mean to you?
I think it's just about working with the imagination, the subconscious, and sort of digging in there and writing things you didn't expect, and like the creative in creative writing, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it could be a number of things. It's not something that needs to be defined in a exact way. I think, you know. Okay. I think it's freedom, you know. I think it's a free line.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you talked about like being a contrarian and stuff growing up. I think a lot of us are in those ways. It's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like, I mean, surrealism is pretty broad. Like the rules are not like narrow for that. You feel like there's a pretty broad definition of what that is?
Well, I mean, I think for someone to say this is surreal, like if they wrote a poem, they said this is surreal, I would probably look for things like unusual things that were maybe not consistent with reality.
Sure.
Maybe dreamlike. Yeah.
Okay. In reading on the history of surrealism and stuff, it talks about it was kind of not invented, but put a name to by like a French guy.
Yeah.
Breton, I want to say.
Yeah.
World War I, World War II. Like, I get it, right? The world was an ugly place.
Yeah.
You could argue it always is or still is, but something about they kind of wanted to like mimic what the world was like. The world wasn't logical, right? The world didn't make sense.
Yeah.
That kind of fit in there. But there's Paz, there's Dali. Paz is Latino, Dali is Spanish.
Right.
Have you seen in your reading that surrealism there's a very specific surrealism in Latin America or in Spanish speaking countries, or is it more broad?
No, I'm actually not really an expert on that, in terms of like the differences, and I don't really even read like the French one. I rarely like, I tend to read the American ones in English, but I'm not really an expert in terms of like the differences and things like that. Yeah.
Have you read Marquez? Have you read Isabel Allende, like magical realism?
Yeah, I had to read it in undergraduate, but I've always had trouble with reading long novels, like the attention thing. So that's why poetry, I always excelled at it, because it was like, 1 minute you read it, you're done,
Right.
So novels, like, to this day, I have trouble reading novels. Like,
yeah, same.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So in reading, you have one, I think it's literally called like is it called A Walk on the Moon?
The moon?
You have two pieces about the moon. I think it's called A Walk, right? And one of them literally starts off, the first sentence is, a man woke up on the floor of the moon, or on the surface of the moon.
Yeah.
And so like, that's what I know of like magical realism, is that it, like that first sentence, I'm like, okay, cool. Like I suspend disbelief, like I wouldn't normally think a person could wake up on the moon, but it's just like, okay, cool. Next, like, interesting.
Yeah.
So that was cool because, I don't have too much of a history in surrealism, but in reading your work, I'm thinking of like magical realism.
Yeah. I think they both are like interchangeable, honestly.
Okay.
I know there might be some professor that would say, "Oh no, this," and but
sure.
To me, it's like I think they're similar.
Yeah.
They would describe unusual things in ordinary language, as if they were everyday occurrence. So that's what I caught my professor telling me that. But at the same time, like, I didn't read the novel. I was out being a dumb kid. So maybe I'll go back to it later.
Yeah.
But so yeah, when I was doing there with the moon, and I was just trying to write things that were interesting, and see how far I could take it with the bizarre, and try to present it in a way that was like nonchalant and
sure.
This is real. Of course it's real. Why not?
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I don't want to get too bogged down on labels. I'm the same. It's like, whatever, if it's good writing, and yours is definitely good writing, then whatever the label, right? What, talking about the Fire Eater, what led to that? What was kind of the background on that? What's, where'd the title come from, and where did a lot of the inspiration for it come from?
That's a great question. I remember my family supports me. They help me out a lot. Like I said, I've taken a non-traditional path. I've got fired for fighting and all kinds of, I've got suspended, all kinds of stuff. So, but they always supported me with like, I would always have a plate on the table at least. But I remember one time I asked my mom, I said, "Do you believe that I'm going to make it as a writer and, a teacher and things like that?" And she was like, "No." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "I've won an NEA fellowship, and they're like, "That's not enough money." I was like, "Oh my God," So that's when I created the character of the Fire Eater, whose family had just abandoned him, and he would have to make it on his own. And that's why he was shooting fire on Hollywood Boulevard, trying to get someone to discover him. Sort of the way that I'm trying to do.
Sure. Oh, well, that's really interesting. Yeah. I love the honesty there. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the Mexican mom right there for you. Yeah.
And so, I could sit down and I could write all these non sequiturs. I could write all these lines that don't make sense. I could talk about the podium to my right. I could talk about El Alfabeto in back of me and some random books, but it wouldn't sound as good. It wouldn't be as good as yours. It wouldn't be, award-winning poetry. How do you put these nonsensical, unconnected, disconnected things together to make the work that you do?
That's a great question. I think in the underlying, in the glue of the poetry, it has to be beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be lyrical. There has to be other things that are traditionally called poetry, alliteration,
Sure.
maybe a subtle rhyme at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the sound has to do with it. Because you're right, you could just, I have some where I try to just write nonsense and not, I'm like, no, So it has to be like, I want it to sound beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
I want it to sound like poetry, like Lorca, so I want it to sound like it's still beautiful. It's not just rubbish,
Sure. So talking about sound, I mean, do you practice in front of the mirror? Do you record it on your phone? Do you workshop with your mom or your friends, or like how do you get the sound down?
I think the sound and meter and all that is like, I listen to a lot of music, growing up. Also, I remember 2014, I was having trouble getting in the bigger magazines, and I took some time off of Antioch,
Mm-hmm.
and I just started reading. Like, I think I read 100 books that year. That's what I say. It might have been a little more, a little less. So I was just like, I had no social life. I was just like, I didn't buy any new clothes or anything like that. I was a minimalist. That's another thing that has guided me throughout this process, is being a minimalist and living like this. So I think when you read so much, you pick up an ear for it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great way to describe it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. You can you can hear it when you read it, even if you're not speaking out loud. That makes a lot of sense, and that's cool too. I was looking for the right word. I was going to be like economy of language, but like minimalist really describes
That's true
it.
too. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, minimalism really describes it.
Yeah.
Like a Hemingway or something like that was known for his economy of language.
Yeah.
And where the sentences may be isolated are fairly minimalist, but together they just, what do they say? The sum is worth more than the parts, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, I wonder if we could maybe get into some, talk about a couple of the poems from.
Okay. Sure.
I had.
Any requests or?
How about Cuauhtémoc? Help me with the Nahual.
Xochipilli.
Right? Like Xochitl. Okay.
Yeah.
Xochipilli. You've got.
Well, I said it wrong too.
I want to talk. I want to talk about it after. I got some really interesting. I thought there's some really interesting stuff, and if you wouldn't mind sharing that, that'd be great.
Okay, here it is. Cuauhtémoc Xochipilli. A jaguar sat in a tree. It was midsummer. The sun was shining fiercely. The jaguar was a golden color with plenty of brown spots. Then the ghost of Emiliano Zapata walked by. He was in full uniform, with rifle and sword, but in black and white. He looked like a cloud. The jaguar leapt from the tree and walked up to Zapata's ghost. The jaguar genuflected in General Zapata's direction. Zapata pulled out his sword and knighted the jaguar. From this day forward, this noble jaguar will be called Cuauhtémoc Xochipilli, he said. The sun faded and set. It began to rain.
And that was, so obviously you can see there, I'm glad I was able to put it up on the screen. It's from the Poetry Foundation. Was this like a poem of the day type of thing, or how did this end up on their website?
No, they publish you in print and online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. I know Cuauhtémoc was a huge name in the Aztec Empire.
Right.
What's the importance of the name Xochipilli, and why did you name it as you did?
He's the flower god and the god of the arts.
Okay.
And so I wanted it to have a warrior name, but also, artistic side to it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Like that contrast between the two.
Yeah.
Zapata, of course, is a huge name in Mexican history.
Right.
I don't know if you saw, all those Bernie Sanders memes yesterday.
Yeah, those were hilarious. Yeah.
There was a great one where you know that famous picture where it's Pancho Villa and Zapata and all the
Oh yeah.
of course Bernie was in that one. That was one of my
Oh
favorites.
yeah.
Man. Of course with the great handlebar mustache, and Zapata was known as being like for the people and the Zapatistas and the
Yeah.
working for the So why Zapata? Why the ghost of Zapata? Why not some other person?
I just think that since I was a kid growing up in Northern Orange County, listening to Rage Against the Machine, they had a shirt that said Rage Against the Machine and it had Zapata on there.
I
And
remember.
I would always wear it,
Mm-hmm.
I was always proud of it because I felt like I looked like him. I was dark skinned. A lot of my siblings are lighter than me. I think I'm probably the darkest one.
Uh-huh.
I have a sister that's also like me, and so I just related to him and his cause, and I just felt he's very noble.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always sort of like admired him, and that's why I threw him in the poem.
I wonder if that I'm an English teacher, so we break down poetry and etc. and
Right.
Close reads and all that.
Right.
I wonder if me in this case, or do you ever get people who you feel like, hey, come on, man, like who overread or read too much into a poem?
Sometimes, but there's a lot in there sometimes too. So
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at where is it? I think you do a great job painting the image of Zapata knighting the Jaguar.
Right.
And I know, one of Zapata's lines was like, es más vale morir en las
just yes.
Sí.
Yeah.
En que morir en las rodillas, algo
knees,
así, right?
Yeah.
Right? The idea it's better to die on your feet than live.
That's what the back of my shirt said.
Is that right?
Yeah, in high school, yeah.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So why the Jaguar? Why that particular animal?
Well, the Jaguar is like is the it's a sacred animal in Mexico, so specifically the southern region.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of Jaguar poems actually.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was able to see one in Cancun area in Mexico, southern Mexico, like you talked about. I think it's huge with the Mayan people as well.
Yeah.
That's really cool. What or maybe you want to resist. What if someone said to you, how would you sum up this piece in a sentence? Or would you be like, that's not what it's about?
You could do that too if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want the answer. Can you tell me the answer? What's this poem about in one sentence? That's for me to figure out, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know about I never liked the idea of like what's a poem about,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's various things going on, and it's just about honoring Mexico and my culture, my heritage, creating like a little story that, I think a lot of poetry is like, I'm Mexican, I'm poor, I grew up in a bad neighborhood, and I have those poems too,
Mm-hmm.
I have plenty of those poems too, but like this allows me to like create another world and mixing my heritage with like surrealism and
that's cool,
and just making a little story out of it.
Nice. Yeah, I love the idea of you definitely create your own world, and it's a great world. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense, the idea of like the reverence for the culture, genuflecting and the knighting and the golden colors and all of that, and of course that regal animal, which is the Jaguar. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I wonder if maybe how about the longboard?
Oh, actually, that one I have it in the book, and I sold out of copies, and it's not online. That's why I couldn't find it.
Oh, okay. Oh, no problem.
Would you? I have what's that?
I won't do justice to it, but can I read it? Is that all right?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. And I was going to ask you about it because, it's one of those where we were talking before we started recording.
Right.
Someone like Sherman Alexie, who,
right.
Say what you want about the personal life, but writer.
Right.
And we were talking about how some of his work comes off at like I think of his story called Indian Education.
Right.
Each grade, there's a line that like sums it up, and it's almost like inspirational, but not cheesy. And I know as an amateur writer, like that's not easy to do. I always feel like it comes off cheesy, and I feel like he did the same thing where, you have this positivity, this inspiration, but it's not forced, it's not cheesy. So
Thank you.
yeah, I'm looking at your awesome cover here of the Fire Eater, and I got the longboard ready to go.
Okay.
Here's the longboard. A man rode a longboard in downtown Los Angeles. It was overcast in the city. He listened to Gary Clark Jr. on his headphones as he rode. He wore his favorite Dodgers jersey. He was not going anywhere specifically. He just liked riding his longboard in the city. He rode through the USC campus. He smoked a cigarette. The metro howled in the distance. He saw a few seagulls overhead. As Gary Clark Jr. played a hypnotic guitar into his ear, he felt as if he were flying and everything were okay. Nothing could stop him now. And the last line is great. Nothing could stop him now. But I even like he felt as if he were flying and everything were okay.
Yeah.
I feel like that's, again, not forced, but like positive and inspirational.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration for the longboard?
The longboard. Well, I grew up riding the longboard. I couldn't stand on the regular skateboard. I would like fall down, and my friends grew up skateboarding, so I would just ride the longboard like for transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when I moved out here initially, I would park in the back of the apartments, and
Sure.
and I would just ride the longboard, and try to avoid people. And there's probably like 4 or 5 gangs in this neighborhood, so I sort of just tried to avoid people with it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm comfortable, like I walk
Sure.
around everywhere and stuff like that.
Sure.
But so I went to a soccer game with my brother-in-law in LA at the LAFC,
Mm-hmm.
and we were on the metro and stuff. And I'm like a suburban kid. I don't really use the train, So after I rode the train and was like in the city, in USC and stuff, walking past there, I wrote like maybe 5-6 poems the next day, like sort of inspired by that.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's where it came in.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Is there something about the longboard like that kind of is like that freedom, that independence?
Oh yeah, definitely. Right. Yeah.
Put your
headphones
in.
Yeah, just when I was younger, especially. Now I'm like working and busy doing things.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was younger, like there was a freedom, and no one could mess with you, and that's part of your identity, I think,
Mm-hmm.
And
mm-hmm.
sort of being like the new generation of Mexican Americans. So yeah.
That's cool.
Freedom.
Yeah. I kind of wish I would have. When I was about 3 or 4, my neighbor took me out on a skateboard. He was like 15. I was too young. I fell. I got hurt. I never skateboarded again. I wish I would have.
Sure. Yeah.
You were talking about writing 5 or 6 poems a day after that soccer game and seeing the metro and all that. So it's a good transition into, what's your inspiration in general? Do you like, do you go out into nature kind of thing, and also kind of like, what's your schedule on a daily basis? Do you like, all right, I'm going to write, for 2 hours every day or 500 words, or you kind of just like whenever it happens?
Yeah, no, I'm more like play it by ear. Not really. Every day's different.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm in a writing mood or spell,
mm-hmm.
I could go like a month writing every day, Maybe not a month consecutively, but
sure.
Like poetry month last year, I probably wrote like 50 poems.
Wow.
And published like half of them or something like that. So it was very productive.
So you got this April coming up. You gotta get more than 50, huh?
I know, but I'm going to be teaching a class too. So.
Oh, all right.
In the poetry month, so.
Yeah.
Prose poetry class, yeah.
Oh, nice. So when you're writing, are you rocking Rage Against the Machine, MF Doom, or are you rocking like Beethoven or something?
No, well, I wrote one the other day, and it was MF Doom beats. But Rage Against the Machine, I tended to listen to when I was younger. I don't really listen to it anymore.
Yeah.
Honestly, but so it's a little heavy for me now. I'm an old man. In terms of, I got to take care of my ears, my hearing.
There you go.
But I'm still down with like the whole imagery and everything. So
yeah.
But yeah, when I write, sometimes it's beats, but most of the time it's just it's just like the middle, like 5 o'clock in the morning, and just like coffee, no food yet, just
yeah,
just like because I sort of have like insomnia, so in terms of I wake up early, and I think it's a side effect of my medication, honestly. So yeah, it kind of works out for the writing and stuff like that, and the editing and being productive when it's quiet. So
yeah. So is this your first time teaching, or you've been teaching for a while?
it's gonna be my first time. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Has quarantine been? I mean, it sounds like you've been pretty productive in quarantine since the COVID.
Yeah, but even before that, I was like an introvert, and I would just go to the library and work there, edit from there. But now I see that I need even the library, you know, and getting out every day, because it's a bit much now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's a little too much,
especially in LA. Shoot.
Yeah,
man. I know you got a lot of poems that are being published coming up.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, quick aside too. I mean, we've talked about it, and I think it's fairly self-explanatory. But you write prose poetry. You know, prose is basically anything that's more like paragraphs and sentences rather than like Shakespeare's type poetry.
Verse, which is more like line break and stanzas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We obviously heard it in the pieces from you.
Yeah.
So I know you got a lot being published coming out soon. What else are you working on? Are you trying to collect them into another, chapbook? Are you what do you got coming?
So right now I have the chapbook that came out 1 year ago, and then the full length, which is some of those poems from the chapbook, and then poems about my life growing up and my family. A lot of homages to my family and my parents, their sacrifice as immigrants and just as parents, and to my grandparents and my siblings. So that's what the first half of the book is about, more like family and identity, and then the second half is the surrealist aspect. And that was just a finalist for the National Poetry Series, so
congratulations!
I was excited about that. Thank you.
Congratulations, that's awesome.
So hopefully that gets picked up, and then after that, I have like a whole nother, like at least a full length, that's done. Like what I've been writing last year and today, this year. Nice. So I have at least like 1.5 or something more.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Have family and friends, a lot of your family and friends read your work?
It's tough to say. I mean, maybe they have, but nobody really says anything about it. Yeah.
And what are you going to try to get across to your students when you become a teacher, when you become a professor?
Well, I think I'm going to figure that out when it happens, like when I write the poems, like, of course I'll prepare and everything like that. But I think I'll just go into the history of the prose poem and the different styles of prose poems, the absurd ones, the surreal ones. There's some that are more autobiographical, political. So there's different styles, and then in terms of getting started, I think we're gonna like pick words and try to improvise from there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Can you let's end with you maybe shouting out one or two. Who's somebody writing right now, 2021, whatever genre, who you're really into?
I'm really into Michael Torres. He's from Pomona, California.
Okay.
He has a book that just came out, won the National Poetry Series last year. It's called An Incomplete List of Names. And I know he teaches like in the prisons and also in University of Minnesota. And also Felicia Zamora, I think, who we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
She's just prolific, and she's going to be teaching at Cincinnati this upcoming semester.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. Awesome, man. Again, thanks again for introducing me to, I'm not introducing me, but really getting me interested in prose poetry, but more so surrealist poetry. I really enjoyed reading it. Wishing you great luck in the future. And thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. I'm gonna read us out here.
Okay.
Thanks again, everybody, for listening to episode 39 of the Chills of Will podcast with Jose Hernandez Diaz. You can now subscribe to the Chills of Will podcast on Apple Podcasts. Please leave me a 5-star review. You can also ask for the podcast by name using Alexa and find the pod on Spotify and on Amazon Music. Follow me on Instagram where I'm at Chills at Will Podcast, or on Twitter where I'm at Chills at Will PO1. This is a passion project of mine, a DIY operation that I'd love for your help in promoting what I'm convinced is a unique and spirited look at an often ignored art form. The intro song for the Chills at Will podcast is Wind Down, instrumental version. And the other song played on the episode is Hoops, instrumental by Matt Whitehour. And both songs are used through archesaudio.com. For now, thanks again for listening. And I hope that these quarantine days bring you texts by writers with mad skills. Texts like The Fire Eater, writers with mad skills like Jose Hernandez Diaz, whose work gives you chills at will.